even without getting involved in the depths of the story, that the two sons of Aaron died. So it says, V'yidam Aaron, and Aaron was silent. That means, basically, after a tragedy, if you really feel it, all you can do is be silent. Very, very hard. The only thing is, it's already like so long ago. And, when you miss something very much, then one day is 100 eternities. I want you to know something unbelievable. I don't know if I told it to Jerry. That, the first synagogue they burned was in Berlin, Oranienburger Straße. This was the synagogue of the Polish Jews. There were thousands of Polish Jews in Germany after the First World War. And there was like a neighborhood where the German Jews had their synagogue, and then where the Polish Jews had their synagogue. And the first synagogue they burned was that synagogue. And since that synagogue was burned, somehow there was never any singing going on at the synagogue anymore. It's half burned, it's still half burned. They have an office there now, it belongs to East Germany. And the most unbelievable thing is that I had the greatest privilege in the world about 5 years ago. I was invited to sing there. And I can only tell you the crying was to high heaven. To high heaven. I remember in the middle of my singing, the crying was so much that just someone taped it. And about 15 minutes you can hear sound in the middle. I want you to know something. Rav Nachman says that, when we say every day, 3 times a day, we say, "Hear Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, Hashem Echad," we close our eyes. Not only we close our eyes, we put our hand over eyes to make sure eyes are closed. Has millions of reasons. So Rav Nachman, the holy Rav Nachman says that, when something is in front of you, you keep your eyes open. If it's getting closer, you have to squint your eyes. He says something is so close that in order to see it, you have to close your eyes. You know what happens to you when you cry? For one split second, when the tears coming out of your eyes, you close your eyes, right? That means I'm so close to it. Because anything which is far, you don't cry over. It's so close. So basically what I would like to do with you tonight is not to open your eyes to something. I want us to close our eyes. To be so close to it. Get a little glimpse. The first thing I want to make clear to you. You see, you read books on anti-Semitism. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I want you to know, in most little villages, in Hungary, in Poland, in Russia, the Jews and the non-Jews lived very peaceful together. They lived very peaceful together. Sure, time to time, for political reasons, and I don't want to mention other people who brought in all kinds of crazy ideas to the little peasant, making crazy to hate the Jews. Basically, the little peasant and the little Jew lived very, very peaceful. I just got a book from a little Jew from Hungary, and he's not a rabbi, and he's not even a scholar. He just wrote down in Yiddish his memoirs from those years. And he writes, do you know we lived in a little village in Hungary, and we lived so peaceful together. we helped the non-Jews, and the non-Jews helped us. We were just happy to be alive. So I'm not going to talk to you about anti-Semitism before. Forget that word anti-Semitism. I just want you to have a little glimpse. You know, some of us, you know, I always dream. You know, there's an airplane in space, a Concorde. New York to Paris, I once had the privilege of being in a Concorde. It takes 3 hours and 26 minutes from Paris to New York. It's unbelievable, right? You just drink 2 coffees and say hello to the stewardess and you're already in New York, right? And I always say, I wish there would be a little Concorde in time. I wish I could jump on a Concorde, go back in time, and stop somewhere in a little village in Poland and see my grandfather, my grandmother, the way they lived, the way they loved their children. You know, friends, in former good days, do you know how close parents and children were in those days? So close. There was no such a thing, a father coming home and says to his son or to his daughter, you know, I'm busy now. I mean, I had a hard day working, just leave me in peace. There is no such a thing as watching television and saying, listen, be quiet, your father's watching television. The family was so strong. So strong. I want you to know, and this is where maybe someday we'll reach there again. I want you to know God was the center of their lives. Nothing else. Mamish, God, the master of the world, was the center of the center of the center of the center. Yes, sure, some of us are religious. We think of God from time to time. And so to speak, we are spiritual. We want to be spiritual. It's all cute. I'm not knocking it. But how does it compare to those people? You know, maybe they lived from bread, but they didn't live for bread like most of us. I want you to know something, and I was already like a little bit, so to speak, right before the Second World War. When we left Vienna, we lived in Vienna before the war. And, you know, my father was like the chief rabbi of a whole, not of a city, but my father had 8 cities under him, and it was 2 synagogues. Misnagdim, like the non-Chassidim and the Chassidim. There was a big courtyard and there were 2 synagogues there. I want you to know something. Every Friday night, there were nearly fist fights. You know over what? Who will have the honor of taking this poor man to his house? It was not that someone says, hey Moshe, you know, really, my wife doesn't, can you please take him? And one says, please, I have already 3 poor people. Leave me in peace. You're fighting. We're fighting over every poor man. Who will have the privilege of having this poor man in his house? I want you to know maybe today a good Jewish mother, cook, is thinking what I'm going to serve Friday night. And again, I can only tell you. You know what my mother was worried about Wednesday? Will we have enough poor people Friday night? I remember, I'm telling you this. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday was my mother was really besides herself if we didn't have a few poor people yet. I remember I was I was always going with my father early. I'm still a good walker. Because my father would go to the synagogue 6:15 and he would run. And I was a little boy, 5, 6, 7. And how fast can you run, right? And Gewalt was running all the time, so I got a little bit into the rhythm of really walking fast. I remember 100 times my mother would yell, "Don't forget to tell this poor man, Rab Shol or Rab Moshe, please to come Friday night." So then you'll say, so the poor man comes Friday night, so did I tell you Baron Rothschild came to our house Friday night? So Baron Rothschild gets all the honor and Moshe is sitting in the corner. No. Do you know who's sitting next to my father? Not Baron Rothschild. He doesn't need it. Moshe, the poor man, needs a little bit honor Friday night. I remember, and it was so strong in my heart. Who is served first? Not my father. Even great rabbis who came to my house. So due respect. There was one poor man who always came to our house as much as was possible. His name was Rab Shol. I remember one time my mother called me in. It was so happened that Rab Shol came on Wednesday afternoon to eat lunch in my mother's house. I remember I was playing football with my brother in the garden. Suddenly my mother calls me. And she says, "I want you to come in and listen. The way Rab Shol says grace after meal." Gewalt did he thank God for this little lunch he had. I want you to know the caring between people. Caring was so much. I want you to know when one person was sick, the whole community was sick. Everything was so deep, everything was so deep. As much as some of us maybe think we are living with the holidays, yes, it does not compare 1/100000th. 1/10000000th. Before the Second World War, the lowest, most poor, most humble Jew, the way they were greeting the holidays was so much heart, was so much soul, so much devotion. Right now, I don't want to sing one of my songs. I want to sing you a song from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, the Holy of Holiest. Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev lived about 200 years ago. And again, I want you to know, I wish some of us would forget the word anti-Semitism. Levi Yitzchak was not only the rabbi of the Jews, he was the rabbi of the whole city. Every person who needed something, whom would they go to? Whom would they pour out their heart to? There are thousands of stories. The Heilige Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, right? You know what's the holiness of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak? For him, every human being was holy. There was no such a thing as a bad person. There are thousands of stories which are not even important now. And in his presence, every human being was really God's image. You couldn't help it. So this is one of the songs, and we were just singing it the whole time, because this is a song he would sing when he would take the lulav on Yom Tov, and just give me good harmony. I want you to know that For the Jews before the Second World War, prayer was not a luxury. You can't live without prayer. Can you live without breathing? Praying. There was no such a thing as not going 3 times a day to synagogue. Do you know that in most synagogues in Poland, Hungary and Russia, you know today, what's a good synagogue? Let's assume they have services in the morning and 5 paid people show up. There was once a big thing in New York, you know, and most synagogues, they pay people to come in the morning to pray because nobody wants to come. So it's a business. So it was a big thing that they wanted to go on a strike, a union of the million people. I'm not even joking, it's a true story. They wanted to make a strike. If they want more, they usually get $1 for a prayer, or 99 plus $1 a penny tax. And they wanted to go on a strike. So you can imagine unbelievable prayers, right? Do you know that? And then the so-called shamus or sexton, you know, today the religious director comes and he closes the synagogue, and then at afternoon he comes and opens it. Do you know in Europe the synagogue had no key? Closing the synagogue? Closing the house of God? You know why they didn't close it? Because it was always full of people. Do you know, it's awesome, until the Second World War, in 99% of all the synagogues, there were shifts, there was learning going on 24 hours a day. I have to tell you something awesome, unbelievable. When I was 5 years old, I had the privilege, my father took me to Ponevezh in Lithuania. And the Ponevezh show was very close to my father, and he was the chief rabbi of Ponevezh, and there were maybe 60 synagogues. And my father asked him, Ponevezh, where are you praying this Shabbos? He said, I want you to know, it was Shabbos Emmer, I remember in the summer. He said, I want you to know, on this particular Shabbos, the water carriers always finish the Talmud. They divide the Talmud among themselves. And once a year, they finish the whole Talmud. Let me tell you something, friends, without sounding bad. 99% of all the rabbis in America haven't even learned more than 20 pages in the Talmud. A water carrier. And the Ponevezh said to my father, I want you to know that I have divided it in such a way that every Shabbos throughout the year, somebody else, the tailors make a siyum hashas, the shoemakers. Do you know what kind of learning was going on there? A poor water carrier who had nothing to eat. Yes, he had nothing to eat. But Gewalt was his heart full with learning, with the Word of God. I have to tell you something. One of the very greatest rabbis in the world came to visit my father. After miraculously, he had a false passport, he made it to England, then he went to Israel, he came to America and he stayed in my house for a few weeks. I'm taking him the first morning to a synagogue in my neighborhood. And there's a so-called sweet rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, a great rabbi. I don't mention names, but if you'd hear from him, you'd say, a great rabbi. Okay, the next morning after the prayers are over, someone had yard set, and some of you maybe know that if you have the day of the memorial of your father, so after concluding the prayers, you dish up a little wine, a little cake, and you say l'chaim to each other. So this rabbi says the blessing over the cake. Sounded so coarse. The rabbi says to me, who was that? I said, the rabbi. He says, he had tears in his eyes. He said, do you know that the lowest water carrier in Europe would make the bracha with more devotion than this rabbi here? Their awareness of God was so different. For them, God was real. Yiddishkeit was not a religion, not a way of life. It was deeper than breathing. So here, let me sing Rabbi Yitzchak Baditch with singing melody and just join me in the deep, sweetest way. Doi 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 doi, oi oi doi doi, oi doi 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 doi, oi doi doi, oi doi doi, oi doi 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 doi, doi 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 doi. Oi doi doi, oi doi doi, oi doi 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 doi, oi doi doi, oi doi doi. Join me, doi 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 doi, oi doi doi. You know, my beautiful friends, when I close my eyes and I think of them, 6 million, it's just, for me personally, such a privilege to be related to them. What a privilege. What a privilege. Do you know there's a famous letter, one of the biggest Chassidim, was found after the war. He writes a letter to God. I wish I could sing for you the letter, but I don't have that much time. He says, my dearest God, I know that tomorrow they'll come and bring me to Auschwitz. And Master of the world, I'll be so angry at you. I'll be so angry at you. I'll be so angry at you because I know what will happen to my children. I know what will happen to my wife. And I know what will happen to all of Israel. So he says, when I'm in Auschwitz, I will tell you I don't believe in you. And I don't love you anymore. I'm not your servant anymore. He says, please God, do me one favor. Don't believe me when I say it. Don't believe me. It's not true. I always love you. I always believe in you. Just it'll be so hard. So he says, if God forbid in my last moment, I will yell out and say, God, I don't believe in you anymore. I'm telling you now. Please, God, don't believe me then. Different people, friends. Really God people. I have to tell you something awesome. I heard it from a Baba Chassid that was in Auschwitz for 5 years. He says, I want you to know I was in Auschwitz for 5 years, and with all the suffering I made it. You know when I broke down? When an American soldier came to get us out. You know why I made it? Because I knew the Messiah is coming to get me out of Auschwitz. You mean to say I was in Auschwitz for 5 years? And we didn't bring the Messiah with our suffering? We suffered for nothing that I couldn't take. I want you to know, those people were they knew whatever we do is to bring the redemption to the world. We're not sitting here for any other reason. They took, for them, the whole story of the Second World was a different story. It is one step, maybe millions of steps closer. Friends, you know, Jerry mentioned it. It is heartbreaking that we put all the energy when we talk about the Holocaust and telling each other how cruel the other side was. This is not the point. God will take care of them. God is a just judge. This is not my business. My business is to tell you what the Koschwitz and Maggid said. You know, in Koschwitz, without telling you horror stories, but I'll make it very short, they divided the city. There were 4,000 Jews in the city. 2,000 Jews were taken to the synagogue, and they put fire to the synagogue. The other 2,000 Jews were taken to Auschwitz. There was no time for selection. Straight to gas chambers. And just open your hearts. The Rebbe, the Holy of Holiest. The last Koschnitzer Maggid, I want you to know, somewhere in a synagogue in the Midwest, somewhere, I found his book. Teachings on the portions of the week. Sadly enough, someone borrowed it from me and I haven't seen it since, but it was just awesome. Just every word is so holy, so penetrating. Okay, the Rebbe is walking with the Chassidim to the gas chambers. And one of the Chassidim says to the Rebbe, Rebbe, what are you thinking? It wasn't the summer. The Rebbe looked up to the sky. He says to the Chassid, look up to the sky. How beautiful the sky is. It's so beautiful. Can you imagine? 2 steps away from the gas chambers, and he didn't stop thinking how beautiful the world is? Then he turned around and says to Chassidim, do you know what a privilege? Our ashes will clean the whole world. Our ashes will clean the world. See what kind of a giant that is? A giant like this doesn't grow anywhere. In Koschnitz, a little city. Most probably, according to us, not even a city. It's just mud. Maybe 2,000 people live there. Nobody has a bathroom in their house. Never heard of that. Telephone. Who knows of a telephone? But every house is a holy temple. They didn't need a telephone to reach God. Always connected. Gewalt, they're connected. Once you know the learning, you know, we Jewish people are supposed to be the people of the book. Someone told me today we are people of the checkbook. Heartbreaking, right? You know, sometimes I talk to people and I realize their idea what a Jew is just so far. The lowest water care, I told you this, Rabbi, the lowest water care in Europe had a different concept of what a Jew is. The devotedness to God. So deep. And you know what else? Being clear when you see suffering, you have to help. There was no such a thing as not helping. There was no such a thing as not selling everything to do somebody else a favor. There was no such a thing as not taking a poor man into your house. You know, today everybody signs checks, I don't want to see the poor man. Keep him away from my house. So that's how our children grow up. This is not the way of Abraham. This is pagan. God's way is, poor man in your house is your brother, mamash. Not a brother, you know. Really my brother. Really my sister. And I have to share something with you, just to make it clear to you, friends. It was not that we Jews took care of the Jews. We felt responsible for the world. And I have to tell you an unbelievable story. A few years ago, I was invited by television in Germany. You know, I was born in Berlin, we lived in Vienna, so I speak German perfect. So here I'm invited, this is like the show in Germany, supposedly watched by 20 million people. And I also gave a concert in Berlin. It's a whole long story. Monday night, I'm supposed to be on television. And I'll tell you the truth, some especially in Germany, they think when they see a Jew, they have to start to talk about the Holocaust. And this was not what I want to talk about. They know themselves. They don't need that. On the contrary, I want to tell them, Mamish, let's rebuild a beautiful world again. I'm holding out my hand with great love to you. So they told me that this woman who's interviewing me is a very sharp cookie. Wow, they said, she is very, very beautiful, but sharp like a knife. So you better watch out. She's going to ask you very biting questions. And it was like hoping. Maybe she'll soften up a little, because I didn't want to get into that, I didn't want to talk to 20 million people and tell them bad things. The world doesn't need that. Today the world needs encouragement. Today the world needs sunshine, not thunder. Okay, I was hoping maybe miraculously she'll talk to me like a mensch. Now listen to this. She comes out, television, and the way this was televised, that she is coming into another room, and she brings me in, and she says to me, I want you to know something. I owe my whole life to your grandfather. She said, I want you to know my mother was very, very, very poor. And she became, my Zayde had 12 children, and he was a rabbi in Lübeck, outside Hamburg. She says, my mother was a very poor girl, absolutely poor, and when she was 15, 16 years old, she says, since your grandmother had 12 children, she needed more help in the kitchen. She became like a little dishwasher in the kitchen. My grandfather became friends with her, and he realized that she's very talented. And my grandfather says to this little girl, heartbreaking to see you washing dishes. You should go to school and do something with yourself. She says, my parents are very poor. Do you know that my grandfather organized for her, that someone paid her schooling? She says, my mother went to university. She married my father, and I had tremendous upbringing. That's why I'm here on television. If my mother would have stayed a dishwasher, I would have never made it. And she says, I'm so glad I can stand before my whole country and thank you for what your grandfather did to my mother. Unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable. Friends, I have this inside vision. I remember Simchas Torah, and when my father was a rabbi outside Vienna. Today, sadly enough, without saying anything bad, Simchas Torah has become like a singles bar. All the singles are running to the synagogue looking for single girls. I'm not knocking it. If this is what makes you happy, mazel tov. Are you capable of maybe 1 inch more than that? And I don't say, God forbid, it's not important to find your wife. But the way they're doing it, they're standing by the door and looking at every girl who walks in. When one walks in, they're already thinking of the next one, If they would talk to one girl and look at her, it's okay, but they never look at anybody, because they always think they're missing somebody. So they're getting crazy. And I don't think God gave us this holiday for that. I want you to now remember in Europe, in the Bes Medrash of the Chassidim, there was a little man by the name Herr Milrom. Herr Milrom, his business was he was selling kosher milk. Kosher milk means he went out and milked the cows, and then he went to the cities, to the houses, and bring milk. He had the little wagon and the little horse. I want you to know something. I'll never forget it. Mama, she was sitting like, in German it's called eine Kutsche, little wagon, and he was holding the reins. He always went to the wrong place because he was singing the whole time. Oh, God. He was always out of everything. You know, he never collected the money after the milk because he forgot. He was out of it. He worked so hard to get the milk together and deliver it to the houses. He was poor. He had barely to eat. He had 2 children. They were also into singing. I want you to know his day was Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, I'm telling you, I cannot imagine the Holy Baal Shem Tov shining more than this little Yidele who's selling milk. Oh, God. You know, when I see those people running around to the synagogue, not knowing what they're here for, I'm thinking to myself, I wish once in their lives they would have seen this Yidele, Herr Milram, dancing with the Torah. Absolutely dancing. Do you think Rothschild would dance with his millions like Herr Milram with the Torah? Not 1 zillionstel. You cannot dance with money like Herr Milram with the Torah. Gewalt was he holding the Torah. And his 2 children, he had a beautiful voice, but he needed real good harmony. So he had a son Bunyo, was 12. Then he had a little boy, his name was Moishele, and he was 6. Between the 3, you could see they split open the gates of heaven. Splitting open the gates of heaven. Let me share with you one more story. It happened already during the Holocaust, but it's a story beyond the Holocaust. This was told by a survivor. I want you to know again, please just remember the good side. This was 1943. The Warsaw Ghetto is already in flames. Comes Simchas Torah, the day of rejoicing with the Torah. Just to make it clear to you, some of your friends, this is the culmination of the holidays. Holidays are 21 days. We take out the scroll, the Holy Bible written on parchment, and we dance with it for 48 hours. Not really. We dance even in our sleep. Unbelievable. The joys to high heaven. It's in the Warsaw Ghetto. The Germans put out signs. Anybody who will celebrate any of their holidays will be shot. There is no two ways about it. And they meant it. And besides, who feels like dancing in the Warsaw Ghetto? Not true. There was a Rebbe, one of our favorite Rebbes, Kleinimus Kalman. I think Sheldon knows about him. Samuel, Ilana won't translate the whole Sefer sometimes. Rabbi Kleinimus Kalman of the city of Pestineshche. Pestineshche is one of the suburbs of Warsaw. He was in the ghetto. And he would always say, "My chassidim eat on Yom Kippur." You know why? Because they were